Hello, guys, and welcome to yet another interesting episode of Web3 Today. In today's episode, we are going to deep dive into the interesting case study of how blockchain is disrupting the global supply chain solutions. Web3 Today is a platform for you to learn, earn, and grow. Web3 Today has a very unique interference of helping you understand and take you through the entire Web3 journey. We have built the platform to make sure that you have a wonderful experience and at the same time make your learning more rewarding and fun. So guys, let's go back to our case study. We all know that COVID pandemic has disrupted the supply chain forever. So just let me take you through the brief problem statement. So if you look at today's supply chain, let's say there's a company, Nestle, and Nestle wants to ship its product from Switzerland to India. And during this entire process, there is so many transactions which is basically involved from compliance perspective to warehousing to storing to trade finance to banking and finally your warehousing and the end consumers. So during this entire process, if you look at the Nestle's as an example and its ecosystem, you would really see that Nestle works with so many suppliers and so many vendors and so many participants through its entire ecosystem or a life cycle of a product. And similarly, companies like Nestle would have like thousands of products and having thousands of life cycles. So the really question here is that how do they manage? And with such sometimes when such COVID pandemic really happening, all these supply chains just get disrupted forever because you could find really unseen issues all across it. So when all these things happen, we all know that today's supply chain are like driven by core ERP systems. And these ERP systems help big companies like Nestle and other entities to streamline their entire processes. But the biggest problem here is that, as I've mentioned, that there are so many participants in the ecosystem, everybody works in silos. So let's say Nestle might use an ERP by Microsoft, and let's say a banking partner might use ERP by Oracle. Now, the biggest question here is that all of these platforms, they really work in silos and they are really not interconnected with each other. And there are issues. The first issue being is that how do we securely share our data with multiple participants? Because a lot of data also has a lot of confidential information. So there is a biggest issue of trust and also the biggest issue of transparency because you would really don't know that how these participants would use your data. Second issue is the security. What if in the world that any of these entities or participants in an ecosystem would get compromised and the chances are your entire technology stack might get hacked. And we have seen several incidents in the past where hackers have penetrated into such big systems and have demanded heavy ransoms. So in this entire scenario, there's a very big risk for large entities to expose their IT infrastructure to such participants. And other important issue is basically your transactions and your contractual management. So during this entire supply chain process, Nestle potentially has to go through several documentation, which is filed with your customs, which is filed with your banks, and also the vendors working with Nestle might need some short-term financing. So they might approach their banks to get, financing and things like that. So how do Nestle control this entire ecosystem? And how do we make sure that the entire transactions which is actually happening is streamlined? The answer to all these questions and problems is blockchain. So we all know that blockchain has a unique capability of smart contracts. So what are smart contracts? Smart contracts are self-executionable contracts which would just execute based on any of the parameters which triggers in the entire ecosystem. So let's say in a very simple example, Nestle creates a parameters that as soon as its goods reaches from point A to point B, its logistics provider should get paid. Now, the logistics provider could be the FedEx and the vendor could be some party X and then there could be Nestle. So as soon as this transaction or this event triggers, the payment is basically settled. So the blockchain is not only essentially making sure that there is a proper contractual management, but also makes sure that there is hardly any default in this entire system because the smart contracts can basically, lock in the money into the escrow system. So guys, here, when we look at very closely, these supply chains are like super duper complex. Now, how do blockchain would disrupt this entire system? And number one, it would basically resolve all the issues related to trust and transparency. Because when we talk about blockchain as a technology, we are talking about building trusted bridges of this ecosystem. Number two, it would help in making the more secured environment and more secure solutions for big companies to transact and interact with each other. As you remember that blockchain is a technology which is based fundamentally on cryptography. So when we talk about cryptography, it's very at a basic level, it's encryption and decryption. So blockchain foundation itself is so strong that the infrastructure and the database layer is basically protected by default. Number three, compliance management. So when we see that this entire system has so many compliances across, and when we talk about compliances are not just domestic compliances, they are also international and cross-border compliances, like from banks to your insurance company to your shipping and logistics provider, everybody would look forward to have compliances right. So when you have this trusted bridge of data between all the participants and the ecosystem, you would essentially determine what data to be shared with which participant. And based on that, these participants can engage in automated compliances. And whenever there is any redundancies in the data, the blockchain would trigger automatically saying that this data at that particular level needs to be checked. And if any participant, like say, we know there are some incidences where people would just forge invoices and would just fraud insurance companies. So insurance fraud overall is over $230 billion globally. So this would also help insurance companies in fraud deterrence and making sure that they can actually get at a source where all these things are basically happening. I mean, if you just Google, you would just be mind boggled to see that how many insurance frauds happen every single year. And the only way to curb this is basically building the blockchain ecosystem and the blockchain based smart contracts. And when you have other technologies combined with the power of blockchain, like AI, you could actually use it to make smarter decisions. For example, you could use AI to basically determine your level of frauds. So you could use AI in predictive analysis, and technologies like IoT can basically help you source the accurate data at the core level itself. So let's say, for example, when Nestle is shipping chocolates, the chocolates needs to be make sure that they are maintained at particular temperature. So you could have IoT sensors to basically determine whether that particular environment is kept as per Nestle's compliances or not. So guys, these are just the few examples I have used to make things very simpler for you all to understand. But there are so many complexities involved in this entire process, and everybody would be quite undetermined to use such transparent technologies like blockchain. But when you have such massive ecosystem, you would definitely need to implement such technologies just to make sure that your consumers are not only getting the right product, but you are also sustainable. So most of these companies, like big companies, they have something called ESG, which is Employer Sustainable Goals. And they have to be compliant at a global level to make sure that their vendors are also being responsible for sustainably sourcing most of the products. So also the biggest question which lies with such massive companies is that are their vendors are like really sustainable? So let me just give you a quick example. We all know about De Beers. De Beers is one of the largest diamond manufacturing companies. So De Beers is using blockchain technology to make sure that their diamonds are sustainably sourced, produced right from their diamond farms or their mining sites to the end consumer. They are tracking every single data, all from their vendors and also from their manufacturing units, just to make sure that the diamonds are properly sourced and sustainably sourced. And at the same time, they are also using blockchain to capture the data and to track the impact which they have on the nature while producing the diamonds. So we all know that obviously mining is a very hazardous process. It causes massive ecosystem destruction to the nature. And De Beers is also using it to track it. So you can imagine the potential of this technology and how companies are using it to track it and also to make sure that they are sustainable. Let me give you another interesting case study about FedEx, right? So FedEx is also building its own entire blockchain ecosystem where they are having all their participants to be part of that one singular database. And this would actually help FedEx to track every single event which is not only taking place within their environment, but also their participants or their stakeholders' environment. So let me give you a very interesting case study about companies like Microsoft, Oracle, and Amazon. We all know that these companies are the leading players in the cloud infrastructure space. And when we talk about blockchain, blockchain is essentially an infrastructure technology. So these companies are helping their participants or their customers to use blockchain very seamlessly. And we all know that these companies have the highest market share in the ERP systems. So guys, in this entire scenarios, you have actually seen how blockchain can help solve a lot of problems. And when we combine blockchain with emerging technologies, it is definitely leading us to a new world of Web3 where everything is transparent. And guys, moreover, in the entire world, there are over 200 startups or the supply chain startups which are actually using blockchain technology, and they have raised in over hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. And in India alone, there are over 30 blockchain startups or blockchain supply chain startups which are using blockchain as a technology and working with global customers to implement blockchain. So guys, if you want to know more about this interesting case study and how companies around the world are using blockchain in real world scenarios and in their day-to-day operations, you can head to Web3 Today and you could just go to our case study section. And you would find the entire library where you can see that not only blockchain but the entire emerging technologies being implemented into the various enterprises, and they're impacting our life as never before. So, guys, thank you so much for staying on with me on this interesting case study, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.